Phone Booth Fighting, twice weekly, free in iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever podcasts are made available. You can also get them right there off the front page of phoneboothfighting.com. All previously aired and archived episodes are there for your convenience. I am your host, Richard Hunter. He is your host,
Frank Mir.
One of us is a two-time UFC heavyweight champion, and we are here in the bunker in suburban Las Vegas, deep inside the bowels of stately Mir Manor to break down UFC 214. I was there last night.
Your two-time funniest comedian of Reno?
You know what? I glossed right over it out of humility, and
as your friend, we got to stick it there.
I appreciate that, Frank. Yes, you're right. I too am a two-time champion when it comes to Northern Nevada comedy. All right, we got to tell you that this podcast, before we break down UFC 214, what happened last night in Anaheim, this podcast is brought to you by Low T Nation. Check out lowtnation.com. Frank, we had the Low T guys in studio a couple of weeks ago. Anybody that wants to go back and listen to that episode can, but a lot of feedback off of that episode. A lot of people interested. They weren't even a sponsor at the time, but based on the feedback they got from our listeners, they've come on board, and maybe you can explain to everybody a little bit about what they do and the service they provide.
Well, it's all about keeping you balanced. I think people know about going out there and having hormone therapy, getting your levels checked, making sure that you're operating on all cylinders. And as we get older and we age, and injuries and different, just the bumps and bruises of life start to accumulate, your quality of life goes down. I mean, the hormones in your body is not necessarily just always about looking good, but it's about feeling good, having the proper frame of mind. And these guys are great at directing you where you're going to get your blood work done, diagnosing it with the proper doctors, and then above all, the fact that they drop the medicine right to your front door once a month. You don't have to run to the clinic. You don't have to keep up with doctor's appointments. It's about the most convenient process I can ever imagine.
Yeah, it was like the, as I understood it, it was like the Amazon of testosterone therapy. It was that easy. They're based in Atlanta, but that doesn't matter because no matter where you are, they can coordinate with a lab in your area and then do everything online. And as Frank said, just ship your supply.
Yep. The only time you got to leave the house is the times you have to do blood work, which that will occur often, as far as every couple months they want to, and that's all about dialing you in, making sure that your levels are appropriate, that you're getting enough of the medicines that you're being prescribed, or not taking too much. And so, other than that, you don't have to keep up with. I have friends here in town that have done therapy, and they have to show up to the doctor once a week to get their injections or whatever they're taking. And just look, man, that's, consistency. Part of being consistent is convenience. If it's not convenient, you're probably not going to be consistent.
Log on to lowtnation.com to find out if you're a candidate, and tell Brandon over there that Frank and Richard from Phone Booth Fighting sent you. This episode of Phone Booth Fighting is also brought to you by Earth's Brew, the plant-based taste of Nirvana. Earth's Brew, a great-tasting, health-conscious, functional tea that provides its effects within minutes using a synergistic mix of evidence-backed plant and herbal ingredients to promote a sense of high-functioning and active calm. It relieves stress, it boosts metabolism, and it focuses the mind to enhance work, school, or play. If you watch our YouTube feed at Phone Booth Fighting, you see the box of Earth's Brew that's always on the table. It's just a little box, doesn't take up a lot of room. Inside that box is how many packets do they fit in there? Is that a 30-day supply?
I believe so.
Yeah, and it's just a little small packet, little thing of powder.
5-gram packs.
You drop it in some water, you mix it up, and you're ready to go. But Frank, I know one of the things you always key in on is the low-calorie, all-natural, plant-based aspect of it.
Definitely. Right now, especially starting to get ready for competitions again, getting my weight down has been one of the themes of the Mir household. And so the fact that it's at 15 calories, no artificial sweeteners or coloring, and pretty much compatible with any kind of diet you're on, whether it's vegan, ketosis, whether you're an Atkins diet. I mean, you name it, this is not going to interfere with it in any way. And it's great to be able to have something at the end of the night that after training and moving around, and especially me, sometimes I got to get my brain to want to kind of shift gears and get ready for sleep and not think about different maneuvers and techniques techniques. And if you go to their website and you put in Foam Booth, you can get a 10% discount. So on top of all the different benefits, we're giving you an opportunity to get into it and try it out for a little bit less money.
Go to earthsbrew.com and enter the promo code PhoneBooth for 10% off all orders at checkout, an exclusive offer just for Phone Booth Fighting listeners like you. All right, Frank, I drove back from Anaheim this morning, was out there for UFC 214, and got to take in the fights live. Get my program here on my lap. Are you aware that if you're in the media, you get a free program?
No.
This is the one of the biggest perks of being in the UFC media is they give you a free program.
Come on, you guys get good seats too.
We do get that. Yes, there is.
Unless you're at T-Mobile Arena, and then you're.
Yeah. T-Mobile press box is a rough view, but. Anyway, but hey, you know what? I'm in the building. I am not complaining. I love being at the fights live, and nothing quite like it. Getting to see the fan reaction, or sometimes lack thereof. We'll talk about that when we get to breaking down the welterweight title fight. But first things first, of course, the big news of the day: Jon Jones is back. Jon Jones reclaims the title that he was stripped of. He knocks out Daniel Cormier with a left head kick at 3 minutes of the third round. And Frank, I'll just get your initial thoughts here, because the finish was certainly what you predicted. Was it every bit as spectacular as you thought it might be?
Yeah, and actually I was even impressed with the patience of Jon. I hear people saying that, well, Daniel was doing well, he was in there winning. And here's the thing, guys. Daniels was playing checkers, and Jon was playing chess. Daniel was trying to overcome the height and reach advantage. So, every time he saw an opportunity, he took it. He wasn't developing, thinking about the second, thinking about the third, or even the final round. Whereas you watch Jon on the flip side, he was attacking the legs with the oblique kicks, inside kicks, the body. He threw about 3 or 4 left hooks to the liver, threw a couple knees to the liver. Even amongst the fact that Jon got hit, that just shows the mental patience that Jon has, that not only, people want to give him accolades for being a phenomenal athlete. And yes, he is a freak of nature physically for a guy who can make 205. If you look at his upper body stature, his structure, his neck, his jaw, his frame, he is huge. You know what I mean? You see the reach he has, he extends his hands. But on top of that, the reason why he is unbeatable, besides, lucky shot, but as far as unbeatable as any MMA fighter that I think has ever lived, is that his mindset too is equal to what his physical prowess brings. And even though I think in the opening bell, DC probably landed the best punch. He landed the whole fight right off the bat, hit him with a vicious uppercut, an uppercut that knocked out Bigfoot Silva, that's dropped many of heavyweights and light heavyweights. You have a guy, it hurt Gustafsson when he hit him with the uppercut. He hit Jon, knocked Jon's mouthpiece out of his mouth. Jon's legs didn't even begin. There was no shake. Kind of smiled like, yeah, you got me. But and still stuck to his game plan of methodically breaking Daniel down. And that's what you saw. The third round head kick wasn't a lucky shot. It was a shot that he was developing for 2 rounds. Sitting there going, okay, I'm going to throw kicks to the body, legs, beat him up. And so then when he started to move the hip, you see that Daniel then at that moment starts to, fade over. He's favoring the fact that he's been hit in the body so many times, and Jon throws it right up to his head, lands perfectly. The shin on the forehead of Daniel Cormier, and then once he has him hurt, even stumbles forward and didn't just throw like, okay, I have to get this guy out of here. You've seen he kept his stance with him the whole time, swept the lead leg, and then once he got on top of Daniel, he unleashed hell. And it's just, again, I'll tell people, Daniel Cormier is without a doubt the second best fighter at 205 that I've ever seen in my life. Mm-hmm. The problem is that he happens to be fighting during the time that the best fighter in the world that probably ever lived in any weight class happens to be competing the same time he does. and he's also 8 years younger than him. Like, I don't know what that would feel like to be Daniel, to be like, damn, I'm probably arguably one of the best fighters of all time. You know, I mean, you could put him in that with the pound for pound. I mean, the guy's never even lost a round.
Before he fought John the first time, he had never lost a round.
Never lost a round.
Never been in trouble. How about that? You never really seen him rocked before that first fight.
Never. And, you know, he's so dominant. He just happens to have John Jones during the same era, and who's younger than him. So it isn't even like he can out-age him. Really, Daniel, I'm curious what he's going to do with his career now. Do you go back and build up and know that, okay, it's going to take me a fight or two and then work his way back in a year and a half? Let's say he gets a second title shot. Now he's 40, fighting a 32-year-old. John's only getting better, you know, and the fight results are getting more to his side. The first one, you know, was a competitive fight. The second one, I know people think it was competitive, but from what I was watching, John didn't even respect the power of Daniel. Every time Daniel like kind of finally caught him with a shot or two, the fact that, I mean, and you're there live, you can see Daniel couldn't even throw a punch without raising his weight up off his feet. So he's having to reach and almost jump into the strike. Well, you talk to any boxer and be like, hey, if you leave your feet and throw a punch, how much power are you going to have when it lands? They're going to be like, fucking nothing. I mean, you want to see power. You look at Rocky Marciano's old films that you can watch on YouTube where you have a low stance. You bury yourself down. Mike Tyson, why did he have so much power? It came from the ground, and he fought with his, you know, he was sitting in the chair. His balance is low. And the problem is that Daniel's not able to hit John in the chin and keep that power stance. He'd have to work his body. An area that it would actually surprise me that Cormier didn't go for. I would have thought he wanted to work the body a little bit more. That way it also disguised his takedowns somewhat. So that way why he's coming in at a lower level. But, you know, it just, again, I think we broke that down leading up to the fight. On paper, John beats Daniel in every facet of the game. Wrestling, striking, you know, ring IQ as far as knowing what goes on and setting up, instruction, you know, I mean, the composure, you name it. It's just that, you know, and it's, again, that's why I think now, and I had tweeted that out last night, is that I feel that now the argument for who the pound for pound greatest fighter is, in my opinion, it's John. Because the other guy out there, Demetrius Johnson, right? His body of work speaks for itself. The guy is, you know, he's mowing through the division. But what kills him is he didn't have a Daniel Cormier. He doesn't have that next guy that's super dominant, that smashes everybody else at 125, that he gets there, and then he smashed him too. If you think about it, down there at the flyweight, they kind of exchange back and forth. There's no, besides DJ, who's the other dominant flyweight?
I mean, you would be looking at guys like Joe Benavidez, Henry Cejudo. I mean, guys that were Mighty Mouse's number 3, number 4 contenders. But you're right; it's not like they were unblemished except for their fight with Mighty Mouse. So I get your point.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Daniel Cormier, never losing a round. I mean, how dominant, and he's fought everybody. Anthony Johnson, Gustafsson, I mean, you name it, the guy's gone out there and done it. It's just that, you know, and then goes and gets smashed by John. So, I mean, you know, it is what it is. How do you make an argument that there's another guy out there that pound for pound, John has never lost a fight. You know, he lost the one that was a DQ for the downward elbow on Matt Hamill. But, I mean, no one's ever beaten John inside the cage. And the number 2 guy who smashes everybody else in the world, who was undefeated as a heavyweight, and the only reason why he probably wasn't the heavyweight champ is that his friend Cain Velasquez was the heavyweight champ, so then he jumps down to 205 and still just he gets knocked out. I mean, no one had beat Daniel on a single round, let alone smash him and knock him out to where he didn't even know where he was.
I thought that, you know, if Cormier was going to win the fight, and here's what I think he did well and as best as he could. I thought if Cormier was going to win the fight, I didn't think he was going to finish Jones. I thought he would have to do a better version of what he did in the first fight. I saw him winning. I didn't pick him to win the fight, but I'm saying if he had, I would see it as he would win by decision. That first fight, I thought it was 48-47. Some scores had it 49-46, but whatever, somewhere around in there. I thought he was going to probably have to win like a 3 rounds to 2 type fight, if you looked at what he did well in the first fight, he did have success with those inside uppercuts.
Yeah.
And he was doing that last night, too.
He did.
Actually, I thought he won the second round based on some of that. Now, the other thing that I credit Cormier with last night was not trying to wrestle John, because that didn't go well for him in the first fight. Going into the first fight, you thought maybe Cormier can out-wrestle John because that's what he had on his pedigree. You found out that wasn't going to be the case.
Nope.
So I didn't have a problem with Daniel's game plan last night.
Yeah.
I think it's just that when you take into account there was a foot difference in reach. A foot.
It just, Daniel did the best he could with the situation that at least with Gustafsson, who has also a superior reach and hands. Once Daniel got in, he could cause damage and cause Gustafsson to freak out. So Gus had to worry about Daniel getting in on him, where John doesn't worry about that. You know what I mean? He's like, well, if you get in and you grab me, I'm the superior wrestler. I'm going to throw you on your head. Yeah. You know what I mean? And he was foot sweeping him and knocking him down, and just enough to keep him off balance. And I think that was kind of John's way of reminding him, like, if you forget about this, I'm going to throw you on your back. You know?
Well, John said that his camp had detected a tell with Cormier that he dipped a little bit to his right, and he saw that indicator, and then that's when he threw the kick, and that was basically the end of the fight. Now, let's look at your Twitter page, because you kind of broke Twitter last night here, Frank. You posted a couple of tweets immediately after the fight. Let's look at this one. People need to understand why DC was so hurt by the outcome of the fight. The loss means he was never really champ and only had the title because of John's absence. Now, that got retweeted 757 times, so nicely done there.
But, and it's true. I mean, the fact is that John lost his title to the fact of his behavior outside the cage. No one took it from him. And so basically it was a vacated title, and Daniel took over as the number one contender, got to fight the number two, and and then had the belt. But the problem is that before he had the belt, he was beaten by John, and then got the opportunity to have the belt in John's absence after already losing to the champion. So then that already cast doubt. Had they never met each other, then there may be some validity that he was the champ at the time. But then what happens is John basically, his fights and wins over Daniel bookend his reign as the champ. So John kicked his ass before he was the champ, Daniel, and then Daniel ran as the champion. And then now that John came back and was able to fight again, he goes and knocks him out. So I think it makes it hard to make an argument. And I think that, the critics and the naysayers were always kind of biting at Daniel's ankles, saying that, like, well, you're not the real champ, you're not the real champ. And Daniel here, come on, the guy's worked really hard. He has an accomplishments that few in MMA ever have had or ever will have. And now he has to sit there and go, shit, man, like, they're right. You know what I mean? Like, how do you, you could get some people that just feel for you and want to be like, oh, attaboy. No, you were the champ. You held it well and represented it. But I think deep down inside, the problem is that Daniel feels it like, well, he even said it. He goes, well, there's no rivalry. He beat me twice. I mean, you can see how crushed he was. He realizes that he now is the perpetual number two. Like, that shadow he thought he could get out of, he is never going to get out of now.
Now, we don't have time to go through all 244 comments on that tweet, but I will tell you one that jumped out to me as I was reviewing them. Somebody had made the point that, well, maybe that's too harsh because Daniel did win a vacated title. He beat Anthony Johnson for that and then defended it, right? And several times. And so I will go so far as to say that, I see him as a champion. I think that it's sort of like this, in my mind. If Jones, let's say, had been out due to some severe injury, and that's why he couldn't be, like what happened to you when you had the title. If it was something like that, I think you could still perceive that person as a champion, especially if they were able to defend it a few times. But you still have not beaten John. So I saw it as I saw both being the case. Like, I see him as a champion. I just see him as not being able to I guess, answer that question. Of course, now after last night, we do have it answered, which was he couldn't beat John.
Right. So it just makes you feel like the guy's you never would have been the champ if it wasn't for what John did.
Yeah, I mean, sort of like, if you remember when Michael Jordan went and played basketball for a couple of years, and I think the San Antonio's. Here's my random.
You mean played baseball?
Baseball. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I was I'm aware that he played basketball.
Right. No, when he went off,
he's pretty good at it, right?
Yeah. When he went off and played baseball for a few years, that was something that the teams that won. I think one of them was the Spurs, if I'm not mistaken. I need to be careful because I know zero about basketball, so I don't quote me on that. But whatever the team was that had won the title during his absence, that was the immediate thing people were saying. Well, of course you did because he wasn't around, and that's fair. I mean, if you really want to answer all questions, then you do it. You do it when Jordan's playing, but at the same time, I guess I give him credit as being a champion, and I'll tell you this. You were talking about what's next for him. This is going to sound cynical, but if I were Daniel Cormier, I'd go ahead and get back into training, win some more light heavyweight contender fights, because you don't know what's going to happen with John Jones.
No, true.
I mean, in a year or two, who knows what spot we're going to be in with him. Title might be available again.
John has been known to shoot himself in the foot.
We'll see.
But that's the problem, and I think that's what is hurting Daniel right now.
Yeah.
Is that Daniel is a good guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's a family guy, coach, people around the team, speak highly of him as far as his leadership roles. And, I've sat and I've worked with him on different broadcasts. I've had conversations with him outside of just the fight world. And
you punched him a few times.
Yeah, we've hit each other. But I mean, but you get the gist that he's actually of good character, And I think that if he would have brought that approach to how he was dealing with John and didn't try to play this short game of like, well, I'm going to try to be the villain here, or I'm going to be, I'm going to say this about John and his drug use or prostitutes and call things out, that made people like, look, if John shoots himself in the foot, let him shoot himself in the foot. You just sit there and let it happen. I don't think that you should step up on other people's shoulders. And I think that's what the problem is that basically Daniel's helping John shoot himself in the foot. Now people are like, well, hey, dickhead, leave the guy alone. You know what I mean? Like the guy, and the problem is that some of the things that, like, if you look at what John has done, it's like, if you just got out of the way, you would have been the good guy in this situation. But because you tried so hard to sell tickets and you kind of stepped out of your own character, it looked bad. I think he created some undue enemies. And that's what now they're going to have to hold on to, is like, well, see, you talk shit about the guy, blah, blah, blah. And now, he kicked your ass. You were never the champ. Like, had he conducted himself just slightly differently, I think Daniel could have went along the lines of like, look, John's a phenomenal fighter. I think that, I can go out there and possibly, I'm going to beat him. You could talk in those realms, but to say that he's a bad champion or this and that, and to, if you call into effect his character or his representation as a champion, well, then people are going to turn around and look at you and go, okay, well, if you're going to call into what kind of champ he is, you were never even the fucking champ to begin with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if he hadn't have opened that door and been like, look, John is phenomenal. I hope he gets his shit together on the outside, because I think we really need to find out who the best in the world is when he gets back in here and fights. I think if he'd have went that route, people would have liked him more. It would have endeared them more, and it would have been more true to himself. And then last night when he gets beat, people aren't just salivating at the mouth to sit there and go, oh, look, he's crying, we got him. And then, I go on, and then the first thing that on my feed that everybody's sending me is, that now that he's replacing the crying Jordan, speaking of Michael Jordan, now he's going to be the crying Cormier. And I'm just sitting there going, shit, like, I think it's all hitting him at once that, and that sucks, man. I think what Daniel's suffering from is that he stepped out of his character, and now he's being judged for it. And the part that sucks about that is he's like, shit, that's not even me. It's kind of like dating a girl, pretending to be something you're not, and her going, I really hate all those things. And you're like, but wait a minute, that's not really me. I was just thinking that's what you wanted. Yeah. I was just trying to be what you needed. Like, I just wanted to get with you. I really am a nice guy. You're like, no, I like nice guys. You're not a nice guy. You're an asshole. And you're like, no, I'm not. I was pretending because I thought that's what you wanted. And that's really what Cormier is in the situation of. He pretended to be this asshole, and he's not an asshole.
What's funny, if you think about it, John got himself in all of this trouble by, I mean, he still would have gotten himself in the trouble, but what John has essentially been the whole time I've, known of his existence is somebody acting like something he's not. I mean, he's someone who. How many times did we have to go through this
preacher's son thing?
Yeah, how many times did we have to go through this nonsense of, well, I dipped and dabbed in cocaine in college, and the one time that I did it, they caught me, but I'm not doing it again, and I'm okay. I mean, we've done this a number of times with him, and so it does seem that finally he's like, okay, well, whatever, I'll just be me.
He has embraced it more, and I think that's why people now, it's kind of like, what was the... during the time that the baseball players got in trouble with the steroids, there was one that played over...
Jason Giambi. The guy that was just like, you got me.
And guess what?
Yeah.
I had a hard time remembering his name right now.
Yeah.
Because he's like, you know what? Honestly, I did it, and I'm out.
And the reason I brought that up is because that's kind of what Cormier got sucked into. Cormier got sucked into getting down on John's level to kind of end up acting like something you're not, which in his case was an asshole. I mean, it's actually not a bad thing to say about someone, to be able to tell them, hey, you tried to be an asshole, you weren't very good at it, and so you got to be you, which is a nice guy. That speaks very well of Daniel Cormier. I think that just is what ended up causing the distraction. Now, here's what I'll say, because I actually don't I don't have a problem with anybody. The promotion of the fight game is a real thing. It is a real component of modern day MMA. And if you're going to do that, I don't have a problem with somebody doing it. I would just say you need to make sure that you're good at it, just like you need to make sure you're good at whatever your claim is going to be. So let's take Conor McGregor, for example. I mean, he's the rare combination of both, right?
Yeah.
Cocky as all can be.
And backs it
but he does back it up.
Yeah.
So here's what you got to do. If you're going to say, hey, I'm going to knock you out within 3 rounds, you got to be pretty damn confident you're going to do it. And if I don't knock you out within 3 rounds, I still have to be so spectacular that nobody holds it against me, the basic claim. But then if you're going to trash talk, and I mean get serious about it, cut to the bone, then I think you've got to be able to know that you can verbally back that up. Verbally. So in Cormier's case, if I were his friend, I would have told him from the get-go, man, you're too nice guy. You're not like that. You're a better person than me. I'm that way. I'm passive-aggressive. Like, if I feel confident enough that I could be shitty with somebody and not... I'm not saying that would make everybody happy with me, but nobody would be looking at me going, "Oh, he isn't any good at that."
Yeah.
So
wouldn't get that like awkward cringe.
That's what I'm talking about.
When Cormier, sometimes after his after the last fight with Anthony, I was all, oh.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Like, Daniel, did you run this past anybody? Like, it's so not you.
So what you were saying
feels awful.
What you were saying off the air was that that Cormier should have taken the route of crediting John for athletic accomplishments and saying, you know what, I can't speak to what this guy is outside of here because I only know him inside the octagon.
Yeah, because anytime you point out people's downfalls, in the cage it's different because we're breaking down technical prowess, your abilities to do things. But whenever and I've noticed this, you critique someone's personal life, you really tread a very thin line that now you might be becoming considered judgmental. So it's one of those things where if I was fighting a guy that had beat his wife, I'm not going to sit there and go on a domestic violence rant. I'm just be like, look, between his wife, I don't know what's going on. I'm going to take care of what happens inside the cage. The fans, you're there to make those decisions and those judgments on whether you want to watch him or not. You know what I mean? Like don't stoop to that level and get in there, because I think that you end up more often than not it looks like it backfires. That's why people go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you and I are different in that regard because I am a fan of judgment. But here's what I would do, and this is the passive aggressive approach, because I do agree with what you're saying that if it doesn't hit, if it doesn't look smooth, it ends up looking incredibly awkward. So here's what I would do. I would do best of both worlds. So I would be like, if I were Daniel Cormier, I'd be like, listen, let me tell you something. This guy, no doubt, may be the best to ever do it. I mean, it's going to be. Are you kidding me? I'm in the fight for my life inside that octagon. Now, outside of it, it's cakewalk. If John and I are both applying to be volunteer for Big Brothers, only one of us is passing the background check. You know what I mean? Right. But in the cage, and then I go right back to the cage. So you're sitting there going, what'd you say? Wait, what? Oh, wait, now you're back to complimenting me. What happened?
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. And then the other thing that people were kind of split on was the fact that Daniel cried after the fight.
Yeah,
and here's my thoughts on it now. And this is coming from personal, firsthand experience, having won titles, having had my ass kicked, trying to win a title. It's okay for men to show emotion and cry. Like I was saying earlier, you find out your little kid has some kind of issues, you can break down and cry. You find out, they call you up and your father passes away. It's okay to cry. There are times that, extreme happiness. You finally overcome it. Like, I would have been okay with John crying, coming over all the things that he had overcame to be back inside there and win the title. I think it would have looked okay if he shed a few tears, like, man, self-inflicted, but what have I had to overcome?
And he might have. He got a little
emotional. And I don't think people are really drawing too much to that emotion of, okay. But here's the time where, and I think Travis and I were talking about this, that it is unacceptable to cry, and that is after someone kicks your ass. I'm sorry, we still live in a very masculine, where we should, thought of how a man should operate. And after one man kicks your ass on a schoolyard, and you start bawling in front of everybody, it looks bad. Now, look, I've had my ass kicked. I remember after the Dos Santos fight, I had my ass kicked. I was going for a title. I thought that I could, regain and be a 3-time, heavyweight champ. Got derailed. I got fucking stomped. I didn't cry inside that cage. I waited until I got back to the locker room. Everybody wanted to check me out. Like, no, give me a second, guys. 1 second. Where are you going? I'm going to go cry. Just being honest with you. Like, I've held it in. I need to let this loose. But I'm a man, and I'm not going to let other people watch me cry after another man just kicked my ass. I'm not going to do it for sure on fucking television. And even back in this locker room where it's just my wife and a few other people and commissioners, you're not going to get to see it either. I'm going to go inside the stall and have a moment to myself and then come back out. And I think that's why, Daniel's getting a little bit of shit about the whole crying aspect, is that, like, you can't cry after you get your ass kicked. I mean, that's the inappropriate time to bawl as a man.
So there's a couple of things there. One, and I do think it's important to point out about Cormier. I mean, I've seen a lot of knockouts in MMA. And in terms of the recovery of that one, in terms of the length of time that it took to get him to stand up and the way he looked afterward and all that, short of being carried out on a stretcher, which unfortunately we've seen on a rare occasion, that was one of the scariest, longest, most awkward recoveries I've ever seen. I mean, there was a shot, they didn't show this on the pay-per-view, but there was an overhead shot that just stayed on him the whole time. And if you, minutes after, John's getting ready to do the post-fight interview, and he's still like wobbly and loopy and everything. So I don't know if I think his brain was probably still scrambled. I don't know if he was really all there. I'm not saying, we were talking before the show. Yeah, he's an emotional guy, so that was probably in there somewhere.
And he cries anyways. We've seen it after the first loss. Yeah. When he was walking down the hallway, he embraced Cain Velasquez, put his head on his shoulder, started crying.
But in terms of just, he may not have been in complete control of, everything going through his mind. But
I don't know. I got punched by Dos Santos several times in the head, so.
Yeah.
I still managed to keep that thought going.
Yeah, right.
Don't ball in front of everybody. No?
Yeah. But, the thing is that I guess I feel maybe this is kind of where I see the difference between you and I, being you've been in there and you've done that. So I don't feel like I can tell somebody, because I just look at him and you, for that matter, or anybody else that's ever done it, and I go, be honest, I'd be crying walking in. You know what I mean?
No, I understand. But I think the parameters of when it's okay to show male emotion, for a man to show emotion, and when it's inappropriate for him to show emotion, I think you can understand what I'm saying, that when another man kicks your ass, I feel that we can all probably come to the conclusion that that is not the time to show emotion. If we're in a bar and you get beat, you get your ass kicked, you can't stand up and start crying. You know what I mean? It's like one of those things where you got your ass kicked, you wave everybody, clear your bill, you go home. You know what I mean? Like, all right, honey, time to call it a night. You know what I mean? Like, this sucked. And then when you get in the car, fucking cry. You know what I mean? But like,
but there's also the point too, maybe that was he crying about
a little bit of both. I think, obviously, the initial, I just lost the fight, but immediately, I mean, Daniel is a smart guy. I think he realized what was really, this fight meant. Had he won this fight, it would have been a trilogy with him and the greatest fighter of all time. It would have been the Frazier-Ali type situation. We only talk about Frazier and Ali because they split the first 2 fights.
Yeah.
There would never have been a Frazier and Ali, would not be in our pulp culture, would not be boxing folklore had Frazier won both fights. Frazier won the first one and the second one. Well, guess what? There's no third.
Yeah.
I mean, most likely there wouldn't have been a third. And it wouldn't have meant the same that fight ended up representing. And the fact that, Daniel is the next best guy right after John, took his place, was a champion, held the belt for John while he was off. If he would have came back and beat John, it would have, first of all, validated the fact that he was the champion for this last year and a half. So everybody's saying that he wasn't really the champ. Now you can't say that no more. You're like, well, no, I actually beat the champ, and so you can't say that I was just holding the belt for him. I actually have a win over him now. So now you are 1-1 apiece. Even if he doesn't go on to win that third one, he's in the mix with somebody like John Jones, who now everybody's, and have been for a while, but who's probably going to go down in history as one of the best fighters who ever graced the cage, to ever fight in MMA. And now you actually are the only one to ever hand him a loss. You guys had a trilogy. Like, now Cormier could have been Frazier, where Muhammad Ali is considered one of the greatest fighters of all time. Yeah. And got taken out of boxing a little bit because of decisions he made outside the boxing ring. Very, very, divisive character, in history back there in the 70s. And so, but Frazier, outside of that fight with him, would have been known as a good fighter, but I think that trilogy really gave Frazier that notoriety, and that was his fame, derived from that trilogy. And I think Cormier could have put him and John's name together going forward, and then I think that would have been a phenomenal story, a great, probably would have been one of the greatest rivalries and trilogies of MMA that I could think of was being written, and all it needed to do was for Cormier to win, and Cormier didn't. So I mean, he knows that. I mean,
even just to win one. Even if he had won this one and then gone and lost the
that's
third
what I'm saying.
one.
He needed to win this one. He could have lost the next one. He could have gotten choked out in 15 seconds in the next one. Yeah. But he needed to win this one for it to be historical, to have significance. It's going to carry past his grave. Now he's just a footnote of a guy who, people are still going to heap accolades upon his name, but he's not going to be as great as he could have been. And I think he realizes that he could have really upped his status to be on the same level with John, whereas now it's like, well, he really honestly now Cormier, and he knew that going into the fight. That's where I think the pressure that he knew he was feeling is that if he doesn't win this fight, he is the number 2 guy. Like, I mean, forever. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's what he is now. Now he is the number 2 guy. He's the silver medalist at the Olympics every year. Or like I remember in high school, I remember one time this kid was getting ready to wrestle and they were naming off his thing. He was a 3-time state runner-up, where he was the second place as a freshman, second place as a sophomore, second place as a junior, and then he ended up losing the match his senior year too and got second place to a guy who was another freshman. I'm sitting there going, wow, like, what does that mean that you always just, I mean, you're there, you're good, you beat everybody, but when it comes to that moment, like, you go to the Olympics, but you don't get to actually get a medal. You know what I mean? Like, right. And that's what Cormier now is kind of stuck in, where it's like, you showed up, you beat everybody there is to beat, but you can't beat the one guy. And so now it's like, well, you're number 2.
It's like the person who comes in second for president of the United States. Like, you were the closest person next to the person who actually became president to getting to be president of the United States, and yet through history you don't remember most of those people.
No.
Quick side note, I have made it an ambition, and I'm nowhere close to completing it, but I've made it an ambition as a cocktail party conversation to memorize all the people who lost. I'm eventually going to try. Right now I can go back to like FDR, but I'm working my way back. I want to be able to name the person and then tell you just a little bit about them.
That's interesting.
Enough until you walk away to go get another drink because I bored you to death.
Somebody like yourself for interesting conversation, but that's what Cormier, that's why I said that. Like, I mean, it's all hitting him that he knew what he was writing on this fight.
Yeah.
He even said so. He goes, I guess there's no rivalry. He won both. He needed to win this one. Like, even if he loses the next one, he needed to win this one. Because even if they do match each other up a third time now, it's still 2 wins to 1. I don't know. Like, it just doesn't carry the same significance.
You know, it's crazy, too, to think about. I mean, Cormier was in a position that many fighters go their whole career and never find themselves in. This whole second underlying yet parallel narrative. It's like you're fighting two battles at once. It's like there's the actual fight, but then there's this whole other thing that goes along with the fight that, depending on the outcome of the fight, is going to determine the position of this secondary narrative. I mean, you think about it, like probably the closest thing, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but probably the closest thing for you, maybe like after your motorcycle wreck, you needed to, know that you could come back, that you could fight again, that you could win again.
Well, actually,
but has there been a situation with an opponent?
A litlittle bit.
Okay.
The Nogueira fight.
Which one?
Well, because the first time I fought Nogueira, he came out later on, and Dana, his knees were hurt, or he had staph, or I forgot what gambit of excuses he basically created to say that that didn't count. So when I fought him the second time, I acknowledged in my mind that, like, look, if I lose this fight, the first fight's going to be considered a fluke.
Okay.
Like, I have to win this fight.
Yeah. So
basically, I had two fights that were up for for conquering. If I hadn't won the second fight, the first fight would have been a wash. Like, well, yeah, but he had all these injuries and you beat him, but you didn't really beat Nogueira.
Yeah.
So by me beating him the second time,
to a degree, there probably is a relation there. But even at that even if you had lost that fight, that would not have affected your legacy in the way this is affecting Daniels. Like,
well, in the sense of me and Nogueira both being submission artists. No.
Well, yeah, but
you're right. Daniels is still on a much higher level, but at least I can see the lines.
But I mean, the reason I'm pointing out the difference is just because even with that, you're one of the few people in the world who could even some way make that relatable and go, well, actually, I had a time that was, but even at that, it's not exactly. No. I'm just saying it's a very
Daniels is
a very rare
life
position.
Altering.
Yeah, it's a very rare position to be in.
No, he was in that position where it's like, this was a moment that's going to define his career, and and it was a heavy moment, and it, he had an insurmountable mountain to try to climb. I mean, they fight each other 10 times, and I think John wins 10 times, because even if Cormier lands a lucky shot, he landed them. He landed an uppercut so hard that it knocked John's mouthpiece out. John didn't even look like it slightly phased him. He smiled. It's like, all right. So I'm like, man, so early in the fight when you're your freshest and you hit the hardest, you couldn't knock him out. You can't take him down. How are you going to win this fight? It's like, I don't know. Maybe just if he can somehow grind him and outpoint him, but it's so hard, especially when John wasn't even trying to go for the kill the first round or two. He was fomenting a game plan that we saw how that ended. He was able to, set up that, work the body enough that then he finally went up to the head. It killed him.
Well, let's talk about a fight that is not going to define any careers. That was the co-main event for the welterweight title between the champion Tyron Woodley and the challenger Damian Maia. Woodley outpoints Maia virtually every round. I think there was a judge in there that might have given a round to Maia. But,
really?
Yeah, I think there might have been one. You know what?
No way.
I did. Let me look at the scorecards because I get the scorecards.
And look, man, Damian's my friend. I like him, but there wasn't even 30 seconds of that fight that he was winning.
Right.
I mean, that I watched. I tried to. I do know that I'm glad that Woodley now, when they put him on a card, I know when I'm taking my bathroom break.
Oh yeah.
That is when Woodley's up, it's time to get a new beer.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. You're not going to miss much.
Let me. I'll look here to see. if I'm right or wrong about that. But because I think it might have been one of those.
Yeah, you're right.
rounds.
Look, 49-49.
Yeah, there it is.
Two judges gave him a round.
Well, and that probably fell into that category of like, okay, we got to give this round to someone. I mean, Cormier shot on Woodley, I think the number was 24 times, 24 stuffed takedowns, but still, by far, the most action of the fight. You know, and certainly he was pressing that action. Now, Woodley, you know, Woodley had busted up Maia's eye early in the fight. His left eye had pretty much closed. But as Dana White had pointed out, look, you're fighting a one-eyed fighter, a guy who's got one eye basically before the first round's over with, and there's opportunity to finish this fight from that point on if you're willing to take a risk. Now, Tyron Woodley's got a marketability problem because he is a guy. You look at a couple of different elements. Number one, phenomenally talented, but this is not a one-off for him. With what happened in this Maia fight. By the way, this fight broke a record for fewest punches ever thrown in a 5-round fight in the UFC, and broke it by a lot.
I think he owned the last one, too.
Is that right? You know what? I didn't hear that pointed out, but that could be. Because
I wouldn't be surprised, because, I mean, his last 2 fights with Wonder Boy, I mean, the first one was kind of exciting. Yeah. The second one was just horrendous.
Right. And so, and that's to the point, because it's not just that it's Maia's style and he's the best, you know, submission grappler and you don't want to go to the ground with. I mean, he had the same problem against a striker like Wonder Boy Thompson. So, you know, you start saying, well, it's not going to be exciting if you fight the striker, and it's not going to be exciting if you fight the jiu-jitsu specialist. I mean, you're quickly running out of options here for excitement. Now, he had a spectacular knockout of Robbie Lawler. That's how he took the title to begin with. But let me tell you something. Being in that arena last night, I don't know how much it translated over television.
Majorly.
I've never heard a reaction like that. It was, the fans were, you know, booing happens a lot, and half the drunks are doing it just because they don't know any better.
It sounded like they were yelling boring.
Oh my God. They were yelling that. They were chanting, "This is bullshit." I mean, it was angry. It was one of those, you ever been in a big crowd where you're like, these people seem unruly. Like, they seem angry and restless. It was like that. And I'll tell you,
pay money to see that.
And I'll tell you what really put him over the edge is when Woodley gets up there and says, "I'm the greatest fighter they're going. I'm the best in the game. I mean, I'm the, you know, this is everything went exactly according to plan." I mean, if you're in that position, even when you say, okay, hey, sorry guys, I didn't have the most exciting fight, but I'm trying to win. I mean, they still boo you. But the thing you definitely don't want to do in that case is going, I don't know what all you guys are booing about. I'm awesome. You know?
Yeah.
And this is not going well. And, you know, Dana was very critical about Woodley after the fight. And look, he's looking at it from a promoter standpoint, and I see it. And how about this, too? And this is not Woodley's fault, but he looks like an action figure, Frank. And so what happens is when you put him against basically anybody else up on the screen, and they're a casual fan who buys a couple of pay-per-views a year, and their money spends just as good as the hardcore fan, and that person looks at it and goes, oh my gosh, this guy looks like a badass, and then you get that kind of thing out of it, that hurts. That hurts the marketability.
Yeah, you know, and then everything look, man, Dana, everything he said last night, I agreed with in his critique over Woodley. Woodley just doesn't want to take chances. He doesn't want to be entertaining. But like they said, that's why, like, the fight with Georges St. Pierre, which would have been a huge money fight for him, he's basically lost the opportunity. It's like, well, I don't want to put you out there and you stink up the arena. And if anything, too, I mean, Tyron Woodley gets paid money for being on the main and co-main event. I don't know if there's a rule that says that you have to have a title fight be on the main co-main event. I mean, I think the next one, go ahead and put him on the, you know, opening or something. You know, put him out there so people can kind of, you know, like, all right, well, you don't have to get here right at 7. Woodley's fighting. So start coming in about 7:35, 7:40, and his 5-round boring decision win will be over with.
Man, I mean, I don't take any pleasure in it. I mean, I want him to, and he's so talented. I mean, that's the thing too. It's not like you're looking at a guy who go, well, he just lucked into this, and I've never really seen anything, worthy out of him, but no, that's not the case at all. He's been awesome at times. His explosiveness is remarkable, but you got to be willing to do it, and.
He fights extremely safe.
He does, and this is one of those things where it's like the UFC. One thing that I feel like they have always done is they have rewarded gameness on top of just about anything else.
Joe Lozans, the Clay Guidas of the world.
They are completely okay.
Donald Cerrone can lose the next 5 fights.
That might be that maybe is,
he's not going anywhere.
No, that maybe is the best example. I mean, we're about to talk about him, but Donald lost to Robbie Lawler last night. Look at when Donald lost to Jorge Masvidal. Okay, no problem, right back in there, and there was no hesitation on the part of the UFC to put the same level of marketing behind him because they knew the fans would be there. They knew no fans were watching that going, oh my God, he just wasn't putting forth an effort. Okay, he got beat. He'll win the next one. Or if he doesn't, it'll still be an impressive performance, And
that's the thing that Tyrone needs to realize is that you get paid for the entertainment value and factor of fighting. You can't sit there and just go, well, I'm winning fights. I'm like, well, if this was amateur and you're going for a gold medal in the Olympics, then absolutely, just win the bout. Do you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, this isn't. This is the difference between professional boxing and amateur boxing.
And case in point, how many people are in the stands at a wrestling tournament?
Yeah.
That aren't related to the people that are wrestling. Okay?
So, I mean, fighting combat sports has to be entertaining. And if you're not an entertaining fighter, this is what happens to you. You get fights starting to get pulled from you. And that's what's happening with Woodley is that, he's lost the support of the production of the UFC because they're looking at it going, all right, like, the fights with Wonder Boy, I guess they're just, your opponent. But now seeing this one, now it's going to start drawing to conclusion and go like, well, let's look back at some of his other fights. Like, when has he been exciting? You're like, well, he knocked out Robbie Lawler. Like, all right, name another one. Do you know what I mean? Like, well, it's actually his opponents usually. And now that I've gone back and looked at some of his fights, it's kind of the other guys have made his fights look more exciting because, like a Carlos Condit coming after him, trying to viciously take him out. And even though he's getting overwhelmed by Woodley, putting him in a fight, But Woodley himself doesn't seem to ever step outside of his comfort zone. And that's what the problem is. And I agree with Dana. He could have knocked him out in the second round. Mm-hmm. You have a one-eyed guy. I mean, you're stopping his shots. Come forward. Do something now. I mean, even if he does start to grab you, have confidence. I mean, but shit, man, are you really going to just be okay with a 5-round? But it seems like he is okay with it. Like the way he's talking, he's like, well, a W is a W, and I won, and you know what I mean? Like, I'm the champ.
I'm saying that's the biggest concern out of all of it is that he's the last to realize that this is an issue. Apparently.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, that was a rough one. Cyborg Justino did what everybody expected her to do, go and claim the vacant women's featherweight title, defeating Tanya Evinger via an eventual TKO about 2 minutes into the third round. But Tanya Evinger, boy, she was tough as she could be. I mean, a natural 135er, a smaller girl coming in and doing her best against Cyborg. I've been a fan of Tanya Evinger as long as I've been watching her in Invicta, and certainly didn't think she had anything to be ashamed of in terms of she was doing her absolute best to stay in there with Cyborg. But let's talk about the bigger picture of this, because speaking of your Twitter feed last night, your hot opinions were not just exclusive to the main event, Frank. You had said something about
I thought you were going to post it up.
Oh, yeah, pull it.
I basically, looking at Cyborg fight, her technical prowess, it's just not impressive to me. I feel that, she basically just manhandles the girls that she puts in front of her, and it's not due to the fact of her skill set. In fact, actually, the fact there's such a size difference and power difference between her and Tanya the fact that it went as long as it did actually kind of surprised me. I felt that, Jermaine or Holly Styles a little bit different. But I think both those girls who are much, even though both of them can make 135, I stand firmly by the fact that the Iron Lady only avoided this fight because she held out for more money. She saw an opportunity to make a lot of money, and so her management's like, well, tell them that you're not willing to fight. So hopefully the UFC comes to the table going, well, what does it take to get you to fight? Instead, they just yanked the title from her altogether, and that was their, negotiating ploy. But
and just to clarify, you don't have any inside information about that. This just comes from being a professional fighter, knowing how managers think. That's what it looked like to you from a mile away.
Yeah, no inside information. Just from me looking at the X's and O's, going, okay, I think this is what I'm seeing here. Is someone who's doing a holdout to try to get more money, and it makes sense to me. You want to get as much money as you can every time you fight. Seeing an opportunity that, like, well, I have the belt. You guys want Cyborg to have the belt. Here's my opportunity to strike while the iron is hot. And so she tried, and instead they yanked it out from underneath of her. But if she can somehow get that fight back on the table, I think she would go out there. If right now her and Cyborg fought, I think Jemima would beat her. She's longer. She's a better striker, except for maybe the takedown. Maybe if Cyborg can grab her and wrestle her down, do well there. But even Amanda Nunes, I think Amanda moves up. If Amanda moved up to fight, she right now, if I was Amanda Nunes and I watched that fight, I would be trying to partition for that. I want to be a 2-belt champion. I know she has her things with her last fight, Shemenko. Help me.
Valentina Shevchenko.
I know that she has to clear the air with that, obviously. But if she could, Amanda hits hard. Cyborg couldn't just punk her and just try to walk her down. And she's a black belt on the ground, So, I see a lot of people out there skill-wise. I think that Cyborg has been so dominant because she's been outside the UFC, and even her fights now that are inside the UFC, who has she fought that's her size? Yeah. Really, you're watching a girl who is way bigger than everybody that she's facing. So it's like, all right, well, this is what happens when we have two athletes that, and then the girls that she's bigger than don't have like a phenomenal skill set to begin with. It isn't like Tanya Evinger, her punch count, she has some decent wrestling, but she's not the best fighter I've ever seen in the women's division, to put it lightly. So she's smashing subpar opponents that are small. Like, it's hard for me to get behind her. It's like, she seems like a nice person. Her personality seems like there's a lot of things going that could be positive. But until she fights somebody out there that, to me, I deem like, okay, you go smash an Amanda Nunes, or you go smash the Iron Lady out there, now we'll talk. Now we'll say that you're this ferocious beast. Because until then, it's like, yeah, but who have you smashed?
Well, I want to see Tanya in the see what she can do now that she's in because she's going to go to bantamweight. She said this in the post-fight press conference in the UFC, and I'm anxious to see what she can do in the UFC because she dominated the bantamweight division over in Invicta, and that is one of those things because the UFC had a parallel division. WEC suffered from this stigma for a long time, where if you were in a weight class that didn't exist in the UFC, that was one thing, but if you were in a weight class that did exist, people would be like, oh, well, there's some reason you're not in the UFC. So I think Tanya's debut in the UFC has been long overdue as a bantamweight, and I just don't think we can. I don't think we can judge last night because she was fighting out of her weight class and against a world beater like Cyborg. Let's see what she can do in the bantam. So she's an incomplete. I agree until we see what she can do against actual bantamweight opponents.
Yeah, I agree. Both of them. Yeah, and the same thing with Cyborg. Who has Cyborg beat up that is of note?
Right. No, that's the thing about being 145.
She has no opponent that if you sit there and go, she beat up so-and-so, you're going to go, oh, wow, okay. You beat up Holly Holm? Yeah, I beat her up. Or I beat up, Misha Tate. Or I beat
bantamweight.
But
bantamweight. Yeah, right, exactly.
But at least a name recognition of somebody that's an opponent of quality.
Yeah.
She hasn't.
Well,
so she's suffering.
I'll tell you this. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you up, but just because you mentioned Holly Holm, Dana White did say last night that Holly Holm Cyborg fight interests him. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a very winnable fight for Holly. I think Cyborg, as far as technique-wise, she comes forward and she tries to overpower girls. I think that Holly's too slick for her. And I just don't think that Cyborg has the technical prowess. Like I watched her in Vegas do a kickboxing match and lose against a girl that no one knows who she is. And so, I still feel like the asset that Cyborg possesses, until she proves otherwise, is that she's just so much more powerful than everybody she faces. But something like a Holly Holm, I don't think it's going to matter.
Let's talk about what happened in the Donald Cerrone-Robbie Lawler fight. Lawler defeats Cowboy Cerrone 29-28 across the scorecards. Good fight. Not a robbery in my mind. I scored it a little differently. I had it 29-28 for Cowboy. I gave him the second and third round.
Well, I think the third round's the only round that was really up for debate. First round was all Robbie Lawler.
Yeah.
Because Robbie jumped on him strong, and great game planning from Robbie to come out there and try to really put it on Cowboy, who, even though I think he's gotten over that, still, if you have to put any kind of knock on his technical prowess, that he could be a slow starter. And so Robbie jumped on him fast and hard. But then once Robbie Cowboy did, Cowboy came on, combinations and movement and angles, and really dominated the second round. And then really the third round was just kind of close. I felt like Robbie just landed a few more shots that looked like they were more devastating than what Cowboy landed. I felt like Cowboy just kind of I don't know, it seemed like he just didn't really let his hands go like he could have.
Yeah, it was one of those fights. It reminded me a little bit of watching and judging Carlos Condit and Robbie Lawler. Because in that fight, it came down to, what did you weigh more heavily? Volume, points, or damage, impact?
We got to get John on the show, McCarthy, because I've actually now, because he also does the ACBs with me.
Yeah.
So I've had this discussion with him on scoring criteria. And now the way the scoring is, it's you judge first effective grappling or striking on a round, right? Well, that is indicative of where the fight occurs. If you're mostly on your feet, we're going to judge the striking. If it's mostly on the ground or against the cage and throws and grappling, then obviously we do that. The first, then off of that, he's saying that the first criteria the judges are looking for is effectiveness. Like, is it hurting somebody? So landing, a hard shot outweighs quantity, to a point. If we go out there and I land 2 or 3 shots that stumble you, you land 15 jabs, you've landed more punches than I have, but the punches I landed hurt you, moved you, rocked you, I'm winning. Because that's how it should go. So basically effective striking as far as power shots landed outweigh quantity.
It was a good fight. I don't know. It was one of these that I think in the back of some of our minds we may have been envisioning, Lawler Hendricks 1 or Lawler McDonald, that type of fight. It wasn't quite that, but it was very competitive. It was very close. It was compelling. And an entertaining fight to watch, and one that I hope these guys before their careers are done maybe meet up again. Yeah. Because this isn't one of these where you can look on paper and go, oh well, 9 out of 10 out of 10 times it happens this way or that way.
No, I'm with you. I had it to where the first round was all Lawler, second round was Cerrone, the third round, I kind of, and look, I'm rooting for Cowboy. And I'm sitting there, and then at the end, I looked over at Jennifer, and she goes, "Did he win?" I'm like, "I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think the third round went towards Robbie, and and this is coming from somebody who's biased.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm looking for a reason to sit there and go, why Cowboy won, but I just felt like he edged him out just a little bit. But had they given Cowboy the decision, I wouldn't have been like, oh, well, he fucking lucked out on that one. I'd be like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, I was hoping, you know what I mean? I kind of felt like it was like a, it was like a 55-45 type thing. You know what I mean? Like, but it wasn't like it was a barn burner of a third round that I can sit there and clearly give to one guy or the other. It was extremely close.
Travis, you know him. Is there any chance that he may have been distracted in the back of his mind, still beating himself up over sleeping through our interview? Because I know he was very bothered by that.
That's That's a good thing to think about. It might have something to do with it.
And I would hate to feel in any way
I'm already feeling
responsible
guilty
for
about it.
Because he did feel.
We shouldn't have sent him the picture.
Yeah. No.
Shouldn't have sent him the picture
Then
before
one
the
of
fight.
you's fallen asleep waiting
You
for him
can't
to
mess with
call
the fighter's
in.
head before the fight.
You're right. We should issue an apology. In the shadow of John Jones apologizing for interviewing Daniel Cormier, we should apologize for giving him some shit about sleeping through our interview. All right, we're sorry, Cowboy. Also, kicking off the main card, maybe the guy who had the most to gain and lost it on the wrong end of the knockout, Jimmy Manuwa, getting starched 42 seconds into the first round by Volkan Oezdemir. Manuwa was the guy who's probably had a claim to the winner of the main event.
Had he won last night, I guarantee you that's who was fighting for the next.
Yeah.
That's what's going to be John's next opponent. But now after seeing, Manuwa get destroyed like that, you're right. I don't think anybody feels worse than DC last night. But as far as if they needed a drinking buddy to go cry over beers, Manuwa would have been his choice.
Yeah, I think so. All right. Anything on the undercard that jumps out at you here, Frank? I'll tell you the feature bout of the prelims, which was Ricardo the Bully Lamas.
That was exciting.
Finishing Jason the Kid Knight. So Knight is this guy that I've been high on. Hick Diaz. What was the other one somebody came up with last night? The Hillbilly. The hell, I don't know. I can't remember. Anyway, he's very exciting to watch. Yep. He Lamas, and I said when we were talking about. Knight I think was ranked 13th, so he's jumping all the way up to Lamas, which I think was a number 4. Lamas was just too much for him at this point. But how many hard shots did Jason Knight eat? How tough was he to get? He almost got out of the first round.
He did, and there was a point there to where Lamas, I think, had to take a deep breath to regain his composure because, he was throwing everything but the kitchen sink, landing on Knight, affecting him. It wasn't like it wasn't hurting him. Knight was on ice skates, but was having a hard time landing that final shot to put him out, and then finally was able to catch him, drop him, and finish him on the ground for the referee stoppage. But even in his defeat, it showed that he's an exciting fighter. Some of the leg locks and sweeps and stuff he was doing from the bottom were very impressive and athletic and shooting for Jason Knight. But Ricardo Lamas is a game player, man. The guy is number 3 in the world for a reason. He has a sound foundation. He basically was able to shake it all off. The heel hook attempt that was kind of close with the 50-50 guard that was starting to kind of occur there, or the shins across the inside of the leg. But, he pulled it off, and it was an exciting fight.
That guy's a lot of fun to watch, and there'll be good things still to come from him. Yeah. Barral is a drift, man. I don't know. Renan Barral is defeated via unanimous decision by Aljamain Sterling, a catchweight fight at 140 pounds because the commission would not clear Barral to fight at 135 because he's had the weight cutting issues in the past. The judges scored it 29-28, 29-27, and 30-26, so there's a 10-8 round in there. I don't know. Barral is a guy who just a couple of years ago, before he lost to T.J. Dillashaw, we were talking, and rightfully so, as one of the best pound-for-pound fighters out there.
He just got off the destruction of Uriah Faber.
He's just a drift.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say about it. He's just out there trying to find his way and seems really lost at the moment.
Yeah, the whole fight he seemed really struggling, and nothing to take away from Aljamain.
No.
It's real athletic and moves around, but Aljamain sometimes, from what I was seeing, there's plenty of opportunities that he puts himself in danger because of his movement and some of the unorthodox positions he throws himself in, that there are opportunities that he could get caught with shots. And we saw that with Brian Caraway, was able to pick apart and use more of a foundation and more of a methodical approach to break down the flashier style of Jermaine. And Renan has that also capabilities to do so, and if not even more dangerous. The guy's an extremely good black belt in jiu-jitsu, very explosive, very technical kickboxer, and he didn't seem like he just didn't want to pull the trigger. I don't know. Watching Renan fight, trying to explain to people how good he was at one point, it makes it seem like he should be like, I felt like watching him is what it'd be like watching a guy now that he's 40 or 42.
Right.
You know, it's like, all right, well, this guy's at the end of his career. It's like, holy shit, he's 30 years old. What's going on here? You know what I mean? Like, why such the downfall in his abilities?
Brian Ortega pulled off a nice guillotine submission finish in the third round, defeating Renato Moicano, a couple of undefeated fighters there. So Ortega hands Moicano the first loss of his career. Ortega is a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu guy, trains with Henner Gracie, and I kind of had an eye on him for a while, and this was I think another step for him to take toward featherweight prominence with that guillotine submission finish, executing a pretty flawless game plan. He said in his post-fight comments that they had drilled that guillotine the second the fight went to the ground. That's something they saw Moicano was vulnerable to, and it worked out well for him. So one of the was that the only submission of the night, wasn't it, last night? Okay, well, there's your submission of the night. All right, yeah. So it was one of the card was so stocked on paper. It delivered. I mean, I don't think it was, it wasn't disappointing or anything like that. No, but
the only fight that sucked was
the co-main. Yeah, it was one of those that also is so good on paper. It's got a lot to live up to. Like, it's going to have to be good to live up to it, but definitely worth the price of admission last night. And funny too that the whole card held together injury free, because it was one of those cards that if you had to have a card where one fight pulled out because of an injury, you could afford to lose one and it would still be compelling, and this one stayed together. All right, well, we'll wrap this one, and we appreciate everybody being along for the ride. Want to remind you to go to phoneboothfighting.com. Why? Well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, the merchandise store is there. You want to get your Phone Booth Fighting t-shirts, you want to get your autographed posters, they're available right now for a limited time at a discount. We ship them all over the world, so go to phoneboothfighting.com and check out the store. Also, the Amazon banner is there, Frank. You click through that Amazon banner, do your shopping on Amazon. No additional charge to you, but it does benefit us. They kick a few pennies back to the show, and that's how we keep buying gear and lights and cameras and all the sort of thing that we're trying to do to make the show grow and make it better. If you can do one thing for us, though, that's tell a friend. Tell a friend about Phone Booth Fighting. That's how we're going to grow the show. Look us up in iTunes, Phone Booth Fighting MMA, and when you go there, click on the 5 stars. Give us that top rating, and if you have a moment, write a favorable line or two. We are overdue, Frank, to read a few of those on the air. Maybe next episode we need to catch up with what some of our listeners are saying. And then, of course, follow us on social media. Everybody was talking about Frank Mir's Twitter feed last night. That's at the Frank Mir, the same on Instagram, and official Frank Mir on Facebook. I am on Facebook at official Richard Hunter. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Richard Hunter. And Frank, our podcast, Phone Booth Fighting, it's out there on social media as well.
It is. Facebook and Instagram, you can find us at Phone Booth Fighting, and Snapchat and Twitter, just Phone Booth Fight.
Guys, we really appreciate you, as always, and we'll say hello to you once again on the next episode of Phone Booth Fighting.